Welcome to Resiliency Within. I'm Elaine Miller, your Elaine Miller Karras. I'm your host today, and I am so very excited to welcome back Dr. Phillip Allen. This is his third appearance on Resiliency Within, so thank you so much, Phil, for being here.
Thank you for having me for sure.
Well, and I also just want to say a little bit about the Trauma Resource Institute, the nonprofit that I founded, I can't believe almost 20 years ago. And they host our show. They're our sponsor. So I'm just going to do a shout out to them. And if anybody wants to learn more about the good works that we do literally all over the world, you can go to traumaresourceinstitute.com and learn more about the Trauma Resource Institute. But let me start out by saying a little bit about Dr. Phil Allen. He is a theologian and ethicist whose research and writings include the intersections of social structure, race, culture, and theology. And an important part right now, the ethics of justice could never be more important in our country as it's ever been. More, it's very important. He has authored two books, Open Wounds, a story of racial tragedy, trauma, and redemption, and The Prophetic Lens, the camera and Black moral agency from Martin Luther King to Darnella Frazier. He is an affiliate assistant professor at Fuller Theological Seminary, where he completed his PhD. Congratulations. I was so happy to hear that. But that's been what, 2 years now, Phil?
Yeah,
It's been a bit.
almost.
Yeah. So he is also a poet and documentary filmmaker. Dr. Allen founded the nonprofit Racial Solidarity Project based in Pasadena, California. And he's also a former Division I college basketball player. He was at North Carolina A&T State University, that I know you're very proud about that,
Yes.
Phil. And he's enjoyed opportunities as a guest chaplain for colleges and pro sports teams. Well, I just have to say one more thing about you, because you're also a community resiliency model teacher. And
Yes.
very proud to have you as part of our fold as well, because you've also been helping us very much so in our projects in the area of the world where we both live that was so devastated by those terrible fires. So I want to just do a thank you to you publicly and on our podcast for your help in that. But let's also say, I want to say a little bit more about what you're going to be talking about today, and then we're going to just dive in. So he's going to talk about the nonprofit he started, the Racial Solidarity Project, and his book, The Prophetic Lens. And I really want to say a little bit about it before he starts, because I think The Prophetic Lens is a very important book and look at the use of the video camera as an indispensable prophetic tool for the security of Black lives, and I'm going to just say all lives, and greater possibility for racial justice. He's going to share a little bit about how the camera is a catalyst, and I think we have never seen it more important than in the last since January of 2026 of what happened in Minnesota. So, um, Phil, and I'm going to call him Phil though, because but I'd love to say Dr. Allen too,
It's
because
fine.
you
It's
worked hard
fine.
for that, right? You worked very hard for that, but we're friends, so
Yeah,
that's what I'm going to say.
absolutely.
And even had me in his documentary, which I'm very proud to
Yes.
be part of true Black history, from when you talked about your grandfather and sadly his murder, and how you learned about his life. And wouldn't if he's looking down from heaven saying, "That's my grandson." So I'm just going to
Mm,
say that, but it gives me a chill when I say that out loud, Phil. So,
yes.
Phil, what's on your mind as we get started today?
Well, that last statement you made just took me to a whole nother place. I wasn't expecting that. Because I've never had anyone actually say that or anything remotely like my grandfather acknowledging, recognizing, seeing, being aware from the heavenly places, or from heaven, what his grandson is doing some 60, 70 years later. So that, wow, that meant a lot to even hear those words. Um, I had a professor, friend of mine, Dwight Ratcliffe, Dr. Ratcliffe, here at Fuller. He went to the Equal Justice Initiative, EJI. They have this. I don't know if it's a museum or this site in the South, and they have a list of all the names of Black folks who were lynched during the Jim Crow era. My grandfather wasn't literally lynched, but in the cultural understanding of the term lynching, he was lynched. He was shot in the back of the head. And so Dr. Radcliffe said his name in that location.
Hmm.
And that just is a similar effect of what you just said. It had the same effect.
Hmm.
Um, because this is recent for me. This is in the last 10 years or so that I've explored learning about my grandfather, telling the story through my book and my film. And it's been life changing for me. I never knew anything about him before 2015. I never saw a picture of him before 2015. And the healing that it's brought for me, for my father, who didn't know his dad. He was 2 years old when his dad was killed. Um, it's been an all life altering. So just you saying that and bringing all that stuff to the surface for me this morning is cathartic.
Well, Phil,
Yeah.
I think that witnessing him, and also because you've taught me about him, is also acknowledging
Mm,
his value for his life and how it was taken away in a most brutal way, and that you have brought him to the surface in all that he was,
yeah,
in the good man that he was, and that you we can embrace and acknowledge that. So of course the death is horrible and terrible, and every lynching is horrible and terrible. And he was a man who had a son, who had a family. And so then it's the breadth of who the person was on this planet.
yeah,
And I am sure he would have been proud of his grandson. I am positive of that. So
yeah.
thank you for saying such sweet words about him.
Yeah. You're welcome. Thank you.
So I know we didn't know we were going to go down this route
No,
about
I
talking
didn't. I
about your
didn't.
grandfather, but is there anything more you want to say about the man that he was? Maybe that's an important part, because I think part of what we wanted to do today is that February is Black History Month,
Yep.
and we both believe in the importance of telling the truth about Black history.
Yep.
And we know that it has been shrouded, it has been forgotten, and right now it's trying to be erased.
Yep.
And we're going to make sure that we do everything we can to hopefully prevent that.
Yeah. We use that word erase, and that's what's been happening. And that's what the truth of what happened to my grandfather was literally erased. His death certificate says accidental drowning. Here's you talk about Black history. Here's a man who served in World War II in the Navy, was willing to put his life on the line for the country, um, and would be forever dishonored with a lie, erasing the truth and replacing it with a lie. It does intergenerational damage,
Yeah.
right? It does something to the generations afterwards. It robs them of a story, the value you talk about in him. It robs us, kids and grandkids and great grandkids, of something we can hold on to that's truth, that's true about him. And I had to search for that to gain that, to get that back. So we talk about Black history and how important it is to uphold the truth, to retell the truth. Um, are we ever free? Are we ever not in bondage if we're living lies, if we're believing lies, if we're fed lies, and we embrace them uncritically? Right? And I think what's happening today with the I don't like to say the administration, I like to say the regime. With this regime,
Mhm.
um, I think it's I don't even have words for it. Like I literally am at a loss for words. I understand what's happening. I understand the ideology. This is what I study and research and write about. So I get the ideology behind what's happening, but it's still hard for me to wrap my mind around the why. Like, why would you, when it's so blatantly obvious to everyone, why would you want to erase such history? We wouldn't, and I tell people, we would not be here without this history. We would not be where we are without the figures and the actions and the movements that have pushed against status quo and power power structures, we wouldn't be here where we are today.
Well, and I think about that in terms of, Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, Rosa Parks, Cesar Chavez. Um, they were not silent during times when, yes, their lives were at risk for speaking out against injustice and also not being accurate about what was happening in present time.
Yeah,
And using that term that we use was whitewashing,
yeah,
in saying something else is, even though you see it, that it's not true. And I'm thinking about, and we talked before the show started about what's happened in Minnesota. We
yeah,
saw with our own eyes Renee Good getting killed, Alex Preddy being killed. He's trying to protect a person on the ground and getting shot.
yeah,
And yet the narrative that was spun was so different. So then it says, do we believe our own eyes or do we believe the regime as you talk about it? But I mean, this is not these are very important subjects.
yeah,
And I know that, we talked about the prophetic lens, and you're talking about it in terms of our racial history. And it is really about all of our history, isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah, yeah. It's about humanity ultimately. My book is focused on my community, but the subject matter, a lot of the things I write about transcend my community. Like we can extend this to any marginalized group or any group in general. And I think it's important that we get the narrative right for the sake of the next generation, not repeating. I'll never forget this. When I went to Auschwitz, I've been there twice, and in front of one of the barracks, it says, "He who forgets the past is condemned to repeat it."
Yeah.
And I literally stopped in my tracks. It was just so profound. As I'm walking in, I stopped and I just stared at that sign. And I walked in the barracks and you could see the faces of the people. They had pictures who stayed in those barracks and whatnot. And I think that that's one of the most important statements that I've ever read. And I repeat it often. And we can't afford to repeat history. Too much damage has been done. There's too much violence in that history. I want to learn from history so I don't repeat it, so that we're better for the next generation. I want my niece and my godson, I want them to have different conversations than we're having to have today. I want this to be so far removed. Like, wow, I can't believe they did that back then.
Mhm.
But we're having a different experience today. That's what I hope, and that's why the narrative has to be told. True history has to be
Well,
told.
and, when you're saying that, I mean, and I think there's, the way that the media conveys the news, for example. So probably unless you lived in Philadelphia, but I get on all these different kind of streams of information that I want to hear about history. And so I have, for example, it wasn't until I think was it 2 weeks ago that I learned that the powers to be tried to remove a illustration that our first president, George Washington, had 10 slaves. Now, he's the founding father of America. He had beautiful principles, but at that time, the principles were only for white men,
Mhm.
that women were not allowed to vote. Women were not. Look, I think we were still chattel of men when George
Mhm.
Washington became president. But so the current administration removed that, and that there was a court order to put it back. And
Mhm.
I saw the mayor of that city talking about the importance of putting that back for the very reason. But what happened to make that happen? They had to go to court
Yeah.
so that that history wouldn't be erased. Can we say that Washington did wonderful things in starting the country, but he still
Yeah.
also had 10 slaves?
Yeah. It's interesting you said that. I preached at MLK Chapel at Fuller a few weeks ago, last month, and my message was we have to be willing to hold the whole story.
Yes.
And I talked about how God is present with us in the tension of the whole story, the good, bad, and ugly, right? Scripture, if I'm a theologian, scripture is not all good news.
No.
Everyone in scripture is not beautiful and lovely and kind. Even the people who God had called, they had ugly parts of their story. And even our own personal stories, we have to be willing to hold the whole story and not live these, and I'm purposely using this word, redacted lives, right? So it's interesting you talk about that dynamic of the good, bad, and ugly. We got to be willing to hold that history.
That's right. And so, but because I think by holding that history, the that beautiful quotation from Auschwitz, then we're not going to repeat the past. And so, people say, "Oh, we would never go back to slavery," but well, maybe, but we're seeing things today that I would never have imagined possible.
Yeah.
But then there's other ways to enslave people,
Yes.
and I think that's maybe we can talk a little bit about that.
Yes. First of all, it's actually happening um, through the prison system. When you have people falsely accused, profiled, falsely accused, falsely arrested, incarcerated, and they're literally, we would call it wage slavery, but they're enslaved. They're working as property of the state, right? It's happening in different parts of the country right now as we speak. So it's just gonna look differently. It's not gonna look the same as it did during the era of slavery, and that's how agile, evil, power, social structures can be. It adjusts, and we have to have the eye. We have to have the discernment to know what road are we actually heading down, right? And change course. So
And
I.
like when you say the word redacted, because if we don't look at it honestly, it's like we're redacting part of present history and saying, oh, well, that's not really the same. Well, it's different, but does it have some of the foundational, I don't know, I'm trying to find the right word, structure
Mhm.
of how that is playing out in present time?
And you know, one of my biggest frustrations, but also, I have to, be a little hopeful when I hear people say this. I never knew that happened. And then I'm saying to myself, I learned that when I was in sixth grade, fifth grade. I knew about lynching when I was a kid. I knew what happened during slavery, the rapes of enslaved women, black men castrated, sodomized, beaten, whipped in front of the other slaves to teach them a lesson. Like I knew the horrors as a kid. And we have adults, and I don't expect everyone to know everything about history because I'm still learning things about my own community, about the indigenous community, about the Latino community. I'm still learning, right? But there are people who literally had no clue about any of the past, especially Jim Crow era, as if slavery ended and then racism ended. And here we are today. So that in between that Jim Crow era just didn't happen.
Mhm.
And, but I have to, be a little hopeful that people are actually learning this history and hopefully it's transformative for them.
Well, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that you and I can have these discussions and that we can say, what do we need to lift up? That you can try to do that. And but here we have a national podcast. People listen to my show in other countries. And so we're lifting up the fact that we are dedicated to tell the true history,
Yep.
present and past, and not to forget it. Because as that beautiful quote at Auschwitz said, if we don't remember it, then it's going to happen again. And I think we've seen where if you look through, history, that it does happen again
Yep.
unless we change that. And so I think there's many of us in the country and that are committed to continuing with accurate history, even though there's forces that are trying to erase it.
Yep.
And that's one of the things I love about your book. And maybe we can segue to your book and talk a little bit more about the media, what prompted you to write this book. And I think the message in it is so incredibly important today.
Yeah. To pick up what you just said and then also continue to segue, one thing we miss is the beauty of communal lament, lamenting together.
So say a little bit more about that. What does that mean to lament as a community?
So before I even wrote the first book, Open Wounds, I told my grandfather's story in class. I had never shared anything about him publicly to anyone. And when we were watching a film, it was a class on Martin Luther King Jr., which I'm actually teaching that class this quarter here at Fuller.
Mm,
It's a full circle moment.
yes,
And
relations, by the way.
thank you. And I'm sharing about him, and I look around the room and people are weeping. And I say in the book, I say in the film, and I tell people often, I had never seen, experienced white people grieving at Black pain. And when I say it was, I got goosebumps talking about it right now.
Mhm.
So there are people who don't really know me joined in with me as I was lamenting my grandfather's death. I was just coming to learn about him at that time. And there was something powerful and transformative about that for me. I think it's important to do that before you even labor to change things. In that book, I say, listen, listen, learn, lament, labor. Let the lament carry you into labor. But there was something beautiful and healing about that communal lamenting together.
So interesting that you talk about that. Listen, lament, labor, because it also is about embracing the whole community and saying, well, and because people have written about white tears and saying, don't cry.
Yeah,
You're just crying. And that's part of your white privilege, and that's part of you not acknowledging what has happened to the Black community, for example. I mean,
yeah,
it's been stated, right? And I can't remember the name of the book because it's leaving me. We'll come back. But this is a different way to look at that, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. And I think there's some truth to that statement or that sentiment for sure. In this particular case, though, I would rather see the tears, the lament, the grief with me than the cold, intellectual, rational approach. Like, don't you feel what I'm feeling right now when I tell this story? So I wanted to see that. And that was transformative for me.
But there's also something about it that I have to say, because it's always been hard for me when I've heard the other, being the person who I am in the world.
Hmm.
The way that you just put it together, it was so embracing of me.
Yes, yes,
My tears of not diminishing your suffering and the struggle,
yes,
but saying, I can have tears from my own heart that this was wrong. And because I care about you, right?
yes,
I care about you, Phil Allen, but I care about communities and the work I do around the world,
yes,
that it has great meaning in the way that you just put it together. I think we need to write something about that together.
yes.
Communal lament,
Let,
honestly.
let's do it.
It's
And
great.
one of the white young men classmates, I hadn't seen him in years. He said, Phil, as you talk about your grandfather being murdered, I'm thinking about my grandfather being one of the men who murdered your grandfather because he knows how his grandfather thought. He knows, I don't know his grandfather. So now it's bringing stuff up for him. And it's not decentering me. I want you to reflect on some things. I want you to think about it, and some things come up for you as well. Again, now it's communal lament. We're in this together.
But it also goes back to your statement from Auschwitz, right? If he
Yes.
doesn't look at his grandfather and say, I don't want to repeat that, I want to be a different man, and
Yes.
he will repeat what his grandfather did.
Yes.
Oh, that gives me a
Absolutely.
chill.
Absolutely. So that moment was transformative for me. And so when I wrote that book and even uh, the prophetic lens, I was in a season of lament. And that lament led me to want to say something, to point something out about what's happening in this country. And that's what led me to want to talk about the importance of the camera because there was no camera when my grandfather was killed. And George Floyd, Arbery, and there was none for Breonna Taylor, but we heard about what happened. Um, and so I started to look at the history of the camera. I took a genealogical approach, a historical approach, the history of the camera in this country, whether still shots or films or videos from the telephone, from the cell phone. How important has it been for our community? And now we see how important it's been for all of us when we're talking about the actions of those in power.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've certainly seen it with Renee Good and with Alex, in terms of the camera saying something.
Yeah.
Because I think there's also something about authoritarianism that's connected to this. And I know we're gonna have to take a break very soon, but because when you're an authoritarian government, you don't ask the people what they think. You
Yes.
tell them what to think based on your perception. And if your perception is a perception of white privilege, if it's a perception of, patriarchy, misogyny, I mean, we could just racism,
Hmm.
then that's what they're conveying to the world.
Hmm.
And it kind of goes back to, I was talking to a person from England today saying, "Oh, you should come to something that we're going to be doing in October." And she said, "Oh, I talked to my husband about it. We're a little bit worried because we've been hearing that even British subjects have been detained by
Mm.
ICE.
Mm.
So we're a little bit worried about coming with our children." So do you see what I'm saying in terms of also the spreading of
Yeah.
it when that authoritarianism gets into the stream of thinking that not only affects a person, a family, a community, but we're talking an international community.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to take a short break, Phil. This happens, every time we do get together.
Yeah.
We're going, oh my gosh, we could probably talk for 3 hours about
Yeah.
everything that we're talking about or more. So we're going to take a short break to hear from our sponsor, the Trauma Resource Institute. And my dear listeners, we're going to be back for a more interesting conversation with Dr. Phillip Allen. Welcome back. This is Elaine Miller-Karras with Resiliency Within, and we have just had a really dynamic conversation with Dr. Phillip Allen. He is with me today. He's a theologian, he's an author, he's a documentary filmmaker. I'm trying to I'm trying to convince him to run for office, but I don't know if I do that or not. But anyway, I would love him to represent me. So, Phil, we were talking about the prophetic lens and the importance of of the prophetic lens of video, of telling the story that's truthful compared to the narrative that can happen from those in power. So, do you want to say more about that?
Yeah. It was interesting. The backstory for that book was similar to my documentary and my first book. I set out to write about Martin Luther King Jr.'s use of the camera during the civil rights movement. And I don't believe, this is just my opinion, I don't know if the civil rights movement would have been successful without the cameramen that were there. Because what they did was they were able to now capture what was actually happening and broadcasting it to the rest of the country and the rest of the world. And that then pricked the conscience, the collective conscience of the country. Now they're being invited to see the violence, the horror that Black folks have been saying, this is what's happening. And now everyone's seeing it. And that changes things. So much so that there's a book that I use in my in for that chapter, a chapter in the book, The Prophetic Lens, that talks about how the cameramen once, because their lives were at risk as well. They were not liked when they were down there filming. And one cameraman was being attacked or about to be attacked. It wasn't even a camera, but they didn't know it wasn't a camera. And he pulled the camera up and said, "I'm filming you." And it caused them to stop their aggression in that moment, and they backed off. That's how powerful recording, capturing, documenting behavior that's going to be broadcasted to others. Now, what you're doing is no longer silent, it's no longer in secret, right? And so that's how important for me the camera was. And I felt like King was this film producer. We don't call him that, but he was a film producer because he did not want to even, sometimes they would cancel um, demonstrations if there weren't going to be cameramen or white mob violence there. They would sometimes cancel demonstrations.
So it was protective then.
Yes. Yes.
Could
It
be
was
protective. I
protective.
guess it
It was,
could be protective, I should
yeah,
say.
it was defense and offense.
Well, as you're talking about this too, because I want to just kind of mention this and because this is very important and I need to get somebody on my show that can talk about this. I actually know Dr. Insu Kimberg, who is amazing, who's done documentaries on her family's internment during World War II. She's Japanese.
Mm,
We've just had another anniversary, of course, of this. And
yeah.
so we think about that Japanese American citizens, oh, I think over 120,000 were interned
Hmm.
during World War II.
Hmm.
And again, I can remember hearing, I said, well, how could that be? I mean, did they intern the German citizens
Mm,
who were born in Germany? The answer to that is no, right? But they interned the Japanese citizens. And I think that's just living proof of what we're talking about right now.
yep. Yep. So exactly. I mean, the documenting history, and I wanted to tell that story. I wanted to tell.
And for one thing, it was Dr. Satsuki Ina. I said the wrong word.
Okay.
Dr. Insu Kimberg is actually a therapist, but Dr. Satsuki Ina is the person who did the documentary. Yeah, I
Okay.
misspoke. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I wanted to tell the story of those who have told stories in the prophetic lens, both false and so we talk about Birth of a Nation and how impactful that film was in the early 1900s, um, depicting um, people of African descent, newly freed African Americans, as an existential threat to the country. We talk about Oscar Micheaux and the first, African American filmmaker. Um, we talk about uh, Gordon Parks, his use of the camera, Spike Lee. I talk about the storytellers. Darnella Frazier, she was documenting and telling a story. Martin Luther King was producing and directing and telling a story during the civil rights movement. And that's essentially what the book is about. I'm telling a story about storytellers.
Well, and I'm just thinking like I've just got this like memory capsule pop because I met Satsuki Ina. She actually
Mm,
stayed at my house. And
mm,
what she did was a documentary about the internment. And she's since written a book called The Poet and the Silk Girl about
Mm.
her family. You see, it's all interconnected. And I think that the power of what you're talking about, and I'm relating it to Satsuki Ina and what she's done
Mhm.
for the Japanese community and how
Mhm.
important that is. I'm just seeing like I feel like it's one of those movies, where all the going click, 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 everything is connected together.
You bring up, you reminded me of another documentary that's doing something similar, telling the story, the whole story, Harvest of Empire. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it tells the story of America's involvement in the very countries who these immigrants are coming from. They're not just wanting to come to the country because they want to come to the country. There was some destabilization. There was some things that happened decades ago that we had a hand in. And now, with the destabilization, the violence, the threats that are there, the immigrants want to come to a better place. And there's people who want to keep them out. But we were part of the destabilization of their countries. I mean, I'm reducing it to that one statement. There's more to that, but that film was transformative for me as well. So it gave me a different perspective on immigration just from watching that film. And so I just think, when we talking about the prophetic lens, how important it is to tell stories with the camera, um, particularly those from the margins, those who don't necessarily have the voice, the resources, the power that many media, like the media companies and the billionaires might. It's important that we tell our stories.
Well, and I think that I believe that you probably have more stories in there. Are you working on another documentary, Phil? I can see that you are, the wheels are spinning.
So here's what I'm wanting to do is I'm taking my life and I'm taking parts of my life and just telling different stories. I'm working on a short film. I want to start with a short film, a narrative, part of my life. You talk about intergenerational trauma. I've never been able to sleep my entire life. Most recently, I've slept better with some melatonin and magnesium, some sleep aid. But my whole life, I've never been able to sleep. And I know it stems from childhood trauma, but my body does not had not settled when it was time for sleep. When I was a kid, I was always the one that was up late at night when the house was quiet, everyone was asleep, I was up. And it
Mm,
was partly the most peaceful time of the day for me, but also I couldn't sleep. My
mm.
body was always on alert, right? So I want to tell that story and the importance, particularly for men, the importance of therapy, talking to someone. There's a conversation around mental health there.
Well, I'm
Um,
wondering too about, learning about the skills of the community resiliency model, because many people have told me that for the first time they learned how to settle their nervous system,
mhm,
where they slowly started to see their sleep improve. I mean,
mhm.
I don't know if this has happened to you or not, but do you want to say a little bit about that?
So I use the skills every day. And I use them. There's some other things I need to do as well before I go to sleep so that I can sleep better. Like I don't need to be doing research and studying and then trying to jump in bed, take a shower and then jump in bed.
And reading something awful and then going, okay, now I'm going to go to sleep and get
Yeah.
alert. Yeah, that's probably not a good idea, Phil. I can see
And
the
then watching a
idea.
rerun of Law and Order SVU.
Yes, no.
So I shouldn't do that.
Yes.
But I will say the skills help me not necessarily with sleep. And if they are helping me with sleep, I haven't connected that. But they help me stay regulated throughout the day. I'm nowhere close to being anxious, um, triggered. And even if I am triggered by certain events or certain things, I know how to settle my nervous system
Mm.
and I can maintain a level of just peace. Not perfect, but I can maintain a level of peace throughout the day. So in that sense, absolutely. And I'm sure it contributes to
Well,
better sleep.
and that makes me, of course, very happy when I hear that because I know that it does that for me too.
Yeah.
And just saying a little bit about that, we know that when you do that, and you can, if you always knew that you could get triggered easily, and now that you don't in the same way, and you can, and even if you get triggered, that you could come back into that zone of well-being, that you are learning how to read your
Yes.
nervous system and
Yes.
coming back into balance. And what we believe happens is that there's new neuronal pathways where you're tuning the nervous system.
Yes.
So I would be surprised that it wasn't helping a little bit with sleep, but who knows? It could be. It's obviously a combination of things.
So what I will say though is before I go to bed or as I'm going to bed, that's what I do now is I'm able to read that body literacy. I know when something's going on and I need to do something, I tap into a resource, right? Or I'm grounding. Like I'm feeling my body on the mattress. I'll lay there for a few minutes and just ground myself. So in that sense, I am, as I'm thinking about,
Well,
I
then
am
that's
using
an amen, hallelujah moment for me. I imagine that those are the skills.
yes,
Oh my,
yes. I
that's
mean, you can't turn it off now. I can't
no,
turn
now that you know it, you can't turn it off. And that's
yeah,
the nice thing about, body literacy and learning how to read your nervous system. Well, that's very sweet to hear that.
absolutely.
So, okay, so I interrupted you about talking a little bit about Krim, because so continue about what you're talking about some very important themes here
So
about
so
about your little film. I mean, I'm saying a little film because you said it was going to be a little film.
yeah, short
That
film.
probably would be a short film with a big impact, knowing you.
And I want it to be a teaser to a longer film. And I'm trying to figure out a way to center because in the documentary, and this is the part that gets a lot of people's responses, the scene with me and my dad. And the record
Can you
kind of
say a little bit about that? Because this is the context of what you're talking about, because that was one of the sweetest parts of the film is the healing that happened between the two of you.
yeah. So my dad and I, for many, many years, did not have the best relationship from my perspective. My dad was abusive to my mom. Um, and it took me years before I understood why. My dad is not a bad person. I absolutely love my father. He's not a bad person. My father was grieving. He was the trauma, particularly at 9 years old when he learned how his father died. And my grandmother said that was the turning point in terms of personality with him. So he carried this rage. And in the marriage, it took its toll. And so my father and I, there was a time when I wished he was dead. I told him this when I was younger. That was the only way I felt like it would stop. Fast forward to making the film, um, that was the beginning for me of healing for us. He had gotten sober, which I'm proud of him for, but that's not easy to go that many years medicating because of the pain that he was in. And then some experiences led to him being sober. And from my understanding, he's been sober for the last maybe 8, 9 years or so. So I'm proud of him for that. But in the film, and it wasn't planned. We just began to talk about, um, we were talking about his father, but then I got emotional and started talking, sharing about, you know, our relationship, but it led to forgiveness.
Mm,
Me saying to him, I forgive you, and him saying, thank you, and I forgive myself, which said to me that he carried a lot of shame
mhm,
and guilt, right? Um, and I did not want to add to that. My biggest thing is I just want him to be healthy and live as long as he can at this point and be sober. And so in that scene where I say I forgive you, and then we shake hands and we hug. I'm in tears, and I say in the film, I I met my father when he was 9 years old
mm,
because I believe that's when he was emotionally arrested when he got the news of how his father was killed, how his father died. Because up until that point, I don't think he knew because my grandmother never talked about him. And so, um, yeah, that was a healing moment,
mm,
and so many people talk about that. But doing the film actually us being able to talk about his father was healing for us.
Yeah. Well, and that's the power of how things impact us generationally that we may have no idea about. I mean, your decision to delve into the knowledge and learning more about your grandfather, how incredibly healing it was. And when you say about your dad that you said, I forgive you, but that he could say that he forgives himself because I'm sure the journey too, when you work the steps, when you recover from having an addiction, that's part of the process. But that's not an easy process, and maybe you can't do that. But it seems like self-forgiveness, there's something very important about that. And that
Absolutely.
doesn't mean to excuse.
Yep.
I want to make sure people understand that doesn't mean excusing behaviors that happen. But if you are on a new course, I think part of that self-forgiveness is some of the fuel that helps you stay in good recovery.
Absolutely. It's taking the weight of shame off and replacing it with the lightness of grace.
I love the way you put things, the lightness of grace.
The lightness of grace that's already extended to us, that God extends to us, invites us into, but often we carry the weight of shame. We're not quite sure. We haven't experienced that type of love before. We're not quite sure that we're still accepted because of the things that we've done in our past. And, for me, for my father to talk about his father with his son was incredible. And we have the best relationship we've had in my life the last 6 7 years. Um, and so that was important. But here's the thing: we were telling stories. We're telling a story in the midst of telling stories, like the whole story, not part of it, not just the best part, not redacted versions. I'm telling the whole story, the good, bad, and ugly.
And the factual story, the
The
accurate
factual.
story,
Yes.
a story that not to be erased, a
Yes.
story to be embraced for, right, the good, the bad, and the ugly, as we said earlier on.
Yep.
I think that that couldn't be better stated about the importance of Black History Month.
Yep. Absolutely.
Mm.
And so, going back to the book, The Prophetic Lens, I wanted to I wanted to shine a light on how important it is to document the truth and to tell it, particularly from the margins. Um, it's healing. It's healing for the person telling it. It's healing for the people who are listening or watching or reading as well. And we can't get into this. We can't possibly think that erasing aspects of history to fit our own individual narratives or group narratives is actually good for us.
Yeah, I don't believe it is. And I think if we ever get to that point of thinking that way, then we're silencing
Yes.
and not being a witness to humans that live in our community and
Yes.
trying to tell a story that's not true.
Yep.
And that becomes diminishing at that very moment. I think about the Somali individuals who've come to our country, and Somalia has gone through such a horrible time of the country that is also connected to colonialism and everything that happened since. And you have very active, amazing members of the community that are being looked upon because they're coming from a particular country, which is the same thing that's happening to Haitians.
Yep.
I spent a lot of time in Haiti after their earthquake of 2010 and still work with incredible folks there in Haiti that are trying to help their community during a very hard time of their history. But people coming to this country and starting a new life here and having new opportunities, I think, gosh, I can say I'm from an immigrant family. And I know that if my mom and grandma didn't come here, and I wouldn't be having this conversation with you right now,
Yep.
or be the first person in my family that graduated from college.
Wow.
So, I mean, obviously the history of a Black person in our country is different because you often got here because you were put on a slave ship, and that is a
Mhm.
different ideology as well
Yep.
that also has to be acknowledged.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And you said something earlier about the wheels are spinning. And even as we're talking, the wheels are spinning. And I think that's I told someone recently about my life what is my life about? I'm a learner. I'm a lifelong learner, and I want to translate that what I learned to others. And that's going to come out through telling stories.
Yeah.
And so the short film that I'm working on, the extended feature that I want that to be a part of to tease is about telling stories um, that help people heal, that give people permission to tell their stories, to not run away from the good, bad, and ugly of their lives. Um, and actually, we can't run from it because our bodies remember them anyway.
Where did you learn that?
I wonder, Krim, man, our
Yeah.
bodies remember,
And
right?
yes, they do remember, and our body can balance the score as well, because we can,
Yes.
like you said so beautifully, how now you just track your nervous system. It's just part of who you are.
Yep.
And you also teach it as well.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, this time has gone so fast this
It
time.
has.
Phil, it always does with us. And I love that our wonderful person from Voice America usually gives me a 4-minute warning. It has given me a 5-minute warning because they know with the two of us, we probably need an extra minute to wind things down.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just say thank you, Matt, to that. So I'm going to just ask you as we're ending this today, is, what are some words of wisdom that you want to share with our community? What do you want them to know as a Black man, as a theologian, as a person who's very close to God and walks the path of, I will say the word that you used earlier, of grace, I'm sure perfectly imperfectly. So, what do you want to say, my friend?
I want to go back to that message I shared during MLK week that it's okay to be in the tension of our stories, to not be afraid of parts of our stories. Um, I believe God is in that with us. In fact, Dr. King said it's through his struggle that he came to realize how real God actually is or was for him. So God is in that the tension, the push and pull, the good, bad, and ugly of our stories, to not be afraid of that. The other thing is, I tell people all the time, listen to your bodies, the wisdom of your bodies, even when making decisions. When you're unsure, check with your body. Is there peace? Is there anxiety about the decision? Your body, there's something there. There's wisdom in that. So those are two things that I would share with people, and I've been sharing a lot lately, echoing those statements. The wisdom of your bodies, listen to it. Pause, slow down your life enough to be able to hear what your body is saying. And if you're a person of faith, God is in that too. There's no one way of seeing God speak to us or move with us. God is in that. And don't be afraid of the tension that
Yeah.
our stories carry.
Well, I've said many years ago, the body holds a wisdom that words cannot speak, and to trust that inside of you as well. So, as we're getting ready to end today, I want to just thank you so much, Phil, for coming. And I'm hoping that we can maybe do another show together because we've been working together. Phil's worked with the Trauma Resource Institute regarding his community in Pasadena, Altadena area that have been really affected by the fires in Los Angeles. And so maybe we can talk a little bit about that the next time you come, that I hope to see
Absolutely.
soon. And to my audience, I think, our conversation is a perfect example of how I always end the show. What else is true? That yes, there's suffering. And I love what he said about how we as humans can hold both. We can hold the tragic story, the story that we may not be proud of, but also the story of redemption and forgiveness and I'll say grace.
And
So
grace.
again, a deep bow to you, Phil. Thank you so much. And
Thank
until we
you.
meet again, this is Elaine Miller Kara signing off for Resiliency Within.